The husband sold his house and abandoned his wife and their 14-year-old daughter to live with his mistress. Months later, he was betrayed and regretted it, but when he found out what his ex-wife was doing with their daughter to make money, he started crying. Mark had always prided himself on being a practical man. He believed that love, like everything else in life, required logic, decisions, and sometimes sacrifices. When he met Emma, he was certain that their marriage would last forever. She was gentle, devoted, and fiercely loyal, everything he had ever wanted in a wife. Their daughter, Lily, was the perfect reflection of the love they once shared. But time changed things. The years dulled the passion, and the routine of everyday life became suffocating. The predictable mornings, the silent dinners, the endless responsibilities, they all piled up, turning what was once love into obligation. And then there was her. Sophie was different. She was exciting, passionate, and unpredictable. She made him feel young again, reminded him of the man he used to be before bills, fatherhood, and marriage wore him down. What began as harmless flirtation soon became something undeniable. Sophie wanted more, and Mark was ready to give it to her. It started with small lies. Late nights at the office. Business trips that didn't exist. Excuses wrapped in just enough truth to keep Emma from questioning him. But eventually, he realized something. He didn't want to lie anymore. He wanted out. One evening, without any warning, Mark sat Emma down at the dining table. Lily was upstairs, completely unaware that her world was about to shatter. "I'm leaving," Mark said, his voice unervingly calm. Emma blinked, as if the words didn't register. "What?" "I found someone else." Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, searching for some sign that this was a cruel joke. But his face remained emotionless. "I've already sold the house," he continued, avoiding her gaze. "I left enough money for you to find a place, but I can't do this anymore." Emma felt her stomach drop. "Sold the house?" she repeated in disbelief. "What about Lily? Where are we supposed to go? She's young. She'll adapt." The words cut deeper than any blade ever could. Mark stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'll send more money when I can." Emma didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to hold herself together. "Mark, please," but he was already walking away. Lily came downstairs just as he was stepping through the door with his suitcase. "Dad?" she asked, her innocent voice laced with confusion. "Where are you going?" Mark hesitated for just a second, just long enough for Emma to see the faintest flicker of guilt in his eyes. But then he turned away, and he never looked back. Emma and Lily stood frozen in the doorway, watching as the man they loved disappeared into the night, leaving them behind with nothing but broken hearts and an uncertain future. The first few nights were the worst. Emma and Lily had no place to go. The house, the one Emma had poured years of love and effort into, was no longer theirs. The new owners had already moved in, and all Emma could do was gather what little they had left and leave. With no steady income and nowhere to stay, she found herself wandering through cheap motels, her savings dwindling faster than she had anticipated. Lily, though only 14, understood the gravity of their situation. She didn't complain when they had to sleep in a cramped room that smelled of mildew. She didn't protest when Emma served them instant noodles 3 nights in a row. She tried to be strong, for her mother's sake. Emma, on the other hand, was drowning in despair. Every morning, she scoured job listings, applied for anything she could find, but the rejections came faster than the interviews. Overqualified. Underqualified. No experience. Too much experience. The cycle was endless. The bills continued to pile up, and the small amount Mark had left them barely covered the basics. Desperation led Emma to jobs she never thought she'd consider. She cleaned houses for wealthy strangers, scrubbing floors while their laughter echoed through rooms bigger than the motel they were staying in. She worked as a cashier at a dingy gas station where men twice her age made comments she pretended not to hear. At night, she came home exhausted, her hands raw from labor, her body aching from standing for hours. Lily tried to help in the little ways she could. She studied under the dim motel lamp, refusing to let their misfortune affect her grades. She hugged her mother more. She told her it would get better, even when she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. One evening, as Emma counted the last few bills in her wallet, she realized something terrifying. They wouldn't make it another month like this. She needed more. And for the first time in her life, she considered doing something she had sworn she would never do. The motel room was suffocating. The thin, stained curtains barely kept out the city's harsh lights, and the air was thick with the scent of damp carpet and regret. Emma sat at the small wooden table, counting the last of their money for the 100th time. $57 and some change. Rent for the next week was due tomorrow. Lily lay on the bed, pretending to be asleep. She wasn't. She could hear her mother's quiet, anxious breaths, the crinkling of bills between her fingers, and the silent weight of despair that filled the room. "Mom." Lily's voice was soft, hesitant. Emma quickly wiped at her eyes and turned with a forced smile. "Are we going to be okay?" Emma wanted to lie. She wanted to tell her daughter that this was temporary, that things would turn around, that Mark would regret what he had done and come back to fix everything. But she knew better. Mark was gone. He wasn't looking back. Instead, she crossed the room and sat beside Lily on the bed, brushing the teenager's blonde hair away from her face. "Of course we are," she whispered. "We always figure things out, don't we?" Lily nodded, but she wasn't convinced. Neither of them were. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She left the motel early, telling Lily she was going to look for more work. It wasn't a lie. She was looking for work. Just not the kind she ever imagined herself doing. She had overheard women at the gas station whispering about side jobs that paid well, jobs that didn't require a resume, just a willingness to survive. She had ignored those conversations at first, convincing herself she would never sink that low. But desperation had a way of shifting boundaries. Emma found herself walking down streets she never dared to before, entering places where the walls were painted in dim, seductive colors and the women behind the counters eyed her like they had seen 100 versions of her before, another desperate soul looking for salvation in the form of dirty money. She met a woman named Carla, a recruiter of sorts. Carla was tall, sharp-eyed, and dressed in clothes that screamed power. She didn't ask for Emma's story. She didn't need to. "You work the floor, you make good money," Carla said simply. "You go beyond that, you make real money. It's up to you." Emma swallowed hard. "I just need something temporary." Carla smirked. "They all do." That night, Emma came home with a wad of cash in her pocket. Lily noticed the difference immediately. The tension in her mother's shoulders, the heaviness in her eyes. "Where did you go today?" she asked. Emma hesitated. "I found a new job." Lily sat up. "What kind of job?" Emma forced a smile. "The kind that pays." Lily didn't ask anything else, but deep down, something didn't feel right. As the weeks passed, the money started coming in. The motel room was upgraded to a small apartment. Bare, but theirs. Emma bought fresh groceries. Lily finally had new shoes for school. On the outside, things were improving. But at night, Emma sat in the shower, scrubbing herself raw, trying to wash away the shame. Lily wasn't naive. She noticed the bruises that weren't there before. She heard the phone calls Emma took in hushed tones, the nights she came home later than before. Then, one night, she heard something she wasn't supposed to. The walls of their tiny apartment were thin, and Lily had woken up thirsty. As she walked to the kitchen for water, she froze outside her mother's room. A man's voice. Low. Familiar. Then Emma's voice. "Just leave. Please." Footsteps. The door closing. Lily rushed back to her bed, heart pounding. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't want to know. But that night, for the first time in months, she cried herself to sleep. And Emma, in the other room, did the same. Mark had never been a man who looked back. He made decisions, moved forward, and never questioned if he had made the wrong choice. At least, that's what he told himself. For the first few months after leaving Emma and Lily, his life had been exhilarating. Sophie was everything he thought he wanted, young, passionate, and free-spirited. She made him feel alive again. There were no responsibilities, no nagging about bills, no dull routines. Just adventure, sex, and the illusion of happiness. But illusions don't last forever. Sophie started changing. The sweetness that had once drawn him in was replaced by something sharper, more selfish. She didn't laugh at his jokes as much. She started coming home late without explanations. Her phone, which she once let him use freely, was suddenly always face down. Mark ignored the signs at first. He didn't want to believe that the woman he had left everything for could betray him. But deep down he knew. One night he followed her. It wasn't hard. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Mark watched from the dark corner of a parking lot as Sophie leaned into another man's car, laughing the way she used to laugh with him. Then, without hesitation, she kissed him. The kiss lasted too long for it to be innocent. Mark's stomach twisted. He wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers. But instead, he just stood there, frozen in place, drowning in the realization of his own stupidity. He had destroyed his family for this woman. And now she had done to him what he had done to Emma. Poetic justice. That night, Mark drank until he couldn't see straight. He stumbled into their apartment at dawn, reeking of whiskey, and found Sophie packing a suitcase. "You're leaving," he slurred, his heart pounding. Sophie didn't even look guilty. "It's over, Mark. It was fun, but you're not the man I thought you were." He let out a bitter laugh. "No. Who the hell did you think I was?" She zipped up her bag and tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder. "Someone with a future. But look at you. You left your family for me, and now you're just pathetic." Mark's blood ran cold. "Get out," he said through gritted teeth. Sophie rolled her eyes and walked out, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, Mark was alone. For the first time in months, he thought of Emma and Lily, not as burdens, but as the people he had betrayed. He imagined Emma's face when he told her he was leaving. He remembered the way Lily had called after him as he walked out the door. And for the first time since that night, he regretted it all. The next morning, Mark sat in his car, staring at his phone. He hesitated before finally typing Emma's number. "No service." He tried again. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Panic crept up his spine. He drove past their old house, but of course, strangers lived there now. His daughter's school was his next stop. When he asked about Lily, the receptionist frowned. "She hasn't been enrolled here for months." Mark's heart sank. They were gone. He had left them behind, and now they had disappeared. Mark spent the next few weeks searching. He called old friends, checked shelters, even tried reaching out to Emma's estranged family. Nothing. It was like they had vanished. Then, one afternoon, while walking through a rougher part of town, he saw her. Lily. But she wasn't the girl he remembered. She stood outside a small, run-down apartment building, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She looked empty. Mark's breath caught in his throat. And then he saw Emma. She was stepping out of the building, dressed in clothes that were too tight, too revealing. She looked exhausted, her face hollow, her eyes lifeless. A man passed by her, brushing his fingers against her waist as he whispered something in her ear. Emma flinched, but she forced a smile. Mark felt his chest tighten. What had happened to them? He wanted to run to them, to apologize, to fix everything. But as he took a step forward, Lily turned, and for a split second their eyes met. The look she gave him wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was nothing. She looked at him like he was a stranger, like he was already dead to her. And Mark, for the first time in his life, cried. Mark stood frozen on the cracked pavement, his breath shallow, his hands trembling. The weight of his choices bore down on him with a crushing force, but nothing, not the guilt, not the regret, compared to the hollow emptiness in Lily's eyes. She turned away first, as if he were nothing more than an insignificant shadow from a past life. Mark wanted to call out to her, to beg her to listen, but before he could find the words, Emma noticed him. She stopped mid-step, her body going rigid. Her eyes, dark with exhaustion, flickered with something unreadable, shock, disgust, maybe even a hint of fear. Mark took a step forward. Emma, she didn't move, her gaze locked onto his like he was a ghost she never wanted to see again. Then, as if suddenly regaining control of herself, she grabbed Lily's arm and turned toward the building's entrance. "Wait, Emma, please." Mark's voice cracked as he reached for her. Emma spun around so quickly that for a moment he thought she might hit him. Her face, once soft and kind, was now hard and unrecognizable. "You don't get to say my name." Her voice was low, sharp, and dripping with venom. Mark swallowed, his mouth dry. I didn't know where you were. I tried to find you." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Tried to find us? Mark, you sold our home. You walked out on us. And now what? You're sorry." Mark's hands clenched at his sides. "I made a mistake." Emma's jaw tightened. "A mistake?" She took a step closer, her body trembling with fury. "A mistake is forgetting to lock the door at night. A mistake is leaving your phone at home. What you did was ruin us." Mark looked past her, at Lily, who stood unmoving, her expression vacant. "Lily," his voice was barely above a whisper. But she didn't react. She just stared past him, as if he didn't exist. Something inside Mark shattered. Emma turned to her daughter. "Go inside, baby." Lily hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding and walking into the building without a word. The door slammed shut behind her. Mark felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "What happened to you two?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, please. Just tell me." Emma's eyes glistened with something dangerously close to tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "You don't get to ask that. I need to know." "No, Mark. You don't." She crossed her arms, her nails digging into her skin. "You lost that right the moment you packed your bags and left us with nothing." Mark's chest ached. "I never meant for this." Emma shook her head. "You never meant for what, exactly? For us to end up in shelters? For me to beg for jobs that barely put food on the table? For Lily to wonder every single day why her own father didn't love her enough to stay?" Mark flinched. "I thought you'd be okay." His voice trailed off, the words sounding pathetic even to him. Emma let out a humorless chuckle. "You thought I'd be okay?" Her voice rose, raw with pain. "You really think the world just hands out mercy to abandoned women and children?" Mark felt his throat tighten. "I can help now. Please, let me help." Emma stared at him, and for a moment he thought she might consider it. Then she exhaled sharply. "You don't get to walk back into our lives and pretend to be the hero. You were the villain, Mark." Mark wiped a hand over his face, the sting of her words cutting deep. "Emma, I swear to God, I'll do whatever it takes. I need a chance to fix this." She looked him up and down, her face unreadable. "Fix this?" she echoed. "There's no fixing this." Mark opened his mouth to argue, but Emma turned on her heel and walked inside, the door shutting behind her with a finality that sent a chill through his bones. For the first time in his life, Mark understood what it meant to be truly alone. And it was unbearable. Mark spent the next few days haunted by Emma's words, by Lily's empty stare. He barely ate, barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them, his wife, his daughter, his family, reduced to ghosts of the life he had thrown away. He couldn't leave things like this. He wouldn't. So, he did what he should have done months ago. He started showing up. Every day, he drove to their apartment building, hoping for a chance to speak with them. Sometimes he saw Lily leaving for school, her shoulders hunched under the weight of a backpack too heavy for her small frame. She never looked at him. Sometimes he saw Emma leaving in the evening, dressed in tight clothing that made his stomach twist with a sickening realization. She always walked quickly, always checking over her shoulder. He didn't know what she was doing. Not exactly. But the bruises on her wrists, the shadows under her eyes. Mark felt sick. One afternoon, after hours of waiting in his car, he finally saw her. Emma was stepping out of the building, dressed in jeans and a faded jacket. She looked exhausted, but not like the nights when she came home late. Maybe she was just running errands. Maybe this was his chance. Mark got out of the car and approached her. "Emma," he called out, his voice careful. She tensed but didn't turn around. "Go away, Mark. I just want to talk." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "We don't have anything to talk about." Mark hesitated. "What if I can help?" She laughed, bitter and hollow. "Help? Now you want to help?" "I mean it." He took a step closer. "Let me do something." "Anything." Emma crossed her arms. "Like what, Mark? You gonna buy us a mansion? Get me a new job? Fix the fact that our daughter doesn't even want to look at you?" Mark swallowed hard. "I can find you a better place to live." Emma stiffened. "We're fine." "You're not," he shot back, his frustration slipping through. "You and Lily deserve better than this." Emma's face twisted with anger. "Don't you dare talk about what we deserve. You think throwing money at us now makes up for what you did?" "No," Mark admitted. "But it's a start." She stared at him for a long time, the battle raging in her eyes. Pride, resentment, exhaustion. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "Fine." Mark blinked. "Fine. You want to help?" She lifted her chin. "Then help." She didn't sound grateful. She sounded tired. Mark didn't care. If this was his one chance to make things right, he'd take it. By the end of the week, Mark had found them a better place. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was safe, a clean, two-bedroom apartment in a quieter neighborhood. No leaking ceilings, no moldy walls. Emma moved in without a word of thanks. Lily barely reacted. Mark didn't blame them. At first, he kept his distance, unsure of his place in their lives. But slowly, he started trying. He stocked their fridge. He covered Lily's school fees. He showed up. But money couldn't erase the past. Emma still looked at him like a mistake she wished she hadn't made. Lily barely acknowledged his presence. She spoke only when necessary, her responses short and distant. One evening, Mark knocked on Lily's bedroom door. Silence. "It's me," he said. "Can we talk?" Nothing. Mark sighed and leaned his forehead against the door. "I know I don't deserve it. But I want to be here. Even if you hate me." A long pause. Then, finally, Lily's voice, quiet and fragile. "I don't hate you." Mark's heart nearly stopped. "But I don't forgive you either," she added. Mark nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "That's fair." He walked away, leaving her with her space. For the first time in months, he felt something other than regret. It was small, barely noticeable. But it was hope. Mark had expected anger. He had expected resentment. But he hadn't expected silence. Days passed in the new apartment, and Emma and Lily continued to live as if he weren't there. He wasn't staying with them, of course. Emma made it clear that she never wanted him under the same roof again, but he visited often, bringing groceries, fixing things, and paying for anything they needed. Lily didn't fight him on it, but she didn't thank him either. Emma didn't push him away anymore, but she didn't invite him in either. It was like they had built walls around themselves so high that even he couldn't climb them. And Mark was starting to wonder if he ever would. One evening, Mark arrived at the apartment to drop off some things for Lily. A new backpack, some school supplies. Nothing extravagant. He didn't want to buy her forgiveness, but things he knew she needed. He knocked. A few seconds later, the door cracked open just enough for Lily to peek through. When she saw it was him, she hesitated. Then, wordlessly, she stepped back, letting him in. It wasn't much, but it was something. Mark set the bag on the table and turned to her. "I got you a few things for school." Lily sat on the couch, staring at the floor. "Okay." Silence. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, his heart pounding. "How's school?" "Fine." Another silence. Then, so soft he almost missed it, Lily whispered, "Why now?" Mark froze. Lily finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why now, Dad? After all this time?" Mark swallowed hard. "Because I messed up. Because I was selfish. Because I was a coward. And I didn't realize what I lost until it was too late." Lily's jaw tightened. "Yeah, it was too late." Mark felt his chest tighten. "I know." Lily stared at him for a long moment before standing up. "I have homework." And just like that, she walked away, disappearing into her bedroom without another word. Mark sat there in the quiet apartment, staring at the door she had just closed. He had been prepared for anger. But this cold, distant nothingness, was worse. Later that night, Emma found Mark sitting on the apartment steps, his head in his hands. She crossed her arms, leaning against the railing. "You look like hell." Mark let out a bitter chuckle. "I feel like it." Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Lily's not ready. I don't know if she ever will be." Mark clenched his jaw. "I can't just give up." Emma hesitated. Then, softly, she said, "I'm not telling you to give up." Mark looked up at her, surprised. Emma sighed, sitting beside him. "I hate you, Mark. I don't think I'll ever stop hating you." Mark flinched, but he didn't interrupt. "But Lily," Emma continued, "she needs a father, even if she doesn't know it yet." Mark felt a lump form in his throat. "So what do I do?" Emma shook her head. "I don't know. But if you screw this up again," her voice hardened, "you lose her forever." Mark swallowed past the tightness in his chest. He wouldn't screw this up again. He couldn't. For once in his life, Mark was going to do the right thing, no matter how long it took. Mark had never been a patient man. He was used to quick fixes, immediate results. But this was different. Lily was a fortress. Every day he tried. Small conversations, little gestures, but the walls never came down. She responded when spoken to, acknowledged his presence, but beyond that, nothing. Emma wasn't much different. She tolerated him, accepted his help, but there was no warmth, no hint of the woman who had once loved him. Still, Mark kept showing up. Because he had to. Because it was the only thing he had left. It started small. One evening, Mark found himself sitting in the living room, flipping through a book Lily had left on the table. It was an English assignment, some classic novel she had to write a report on. "Do you like it?" he asked without thinking. Lily, sitting across the room, barely glanced at him. It's okay. Mark hesitated. I read that one in school too. She scoffed. Doubt it. He raised an eyebrow. What, you think I never read? Lily finally looked at him, her expression skeptical. You never seemed like the type. Mark smirked. I wasn't. But your mom used to make me. Said I needed to expand my mind. Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Just for a second. She used to say that to me too, she muttered. Mark chuckled. Yeah. Guess she hasn't changed much. Lily didn't respond, but she didn't shut him down either. It wasn't much. But it was a start. A week later, Mark came by with groceries, as he always did. Emma was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, when she suddenly spoke. You don't have to do this, you know. Mark placed a bag on the counter. Do what? Emma sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. All of this. The groceries, the money, the effort. You don't owe us anything. Mark clenched his jaw. Yes, I do. Emma stared at him for a moment before shaking her head. You can't undo the past. I know, he admitted. But I can do something. Emma exhaled, crossing her arms. You don't get to just show up now and expect us to fall back into your life. I don't expect that, he said. But I'm not walking away again. Emma studied him, her eyes searching for something. Mark didn't know what she saw, but after a long pause, she finally said, Dinner's at 7. If you want to stay. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first invitation he had received in a long time. And Mark would take it. Weeks passed, and slowly, painfully slowly, things started to change. Lily still wasn't warm, but she didn't avoid him anymore. She asked him for a ride to school once. She let him help her with a math problem. She rolled her eyes at his bad jokes, but he caught a hint of a smile once or twice. Emma was still guarded, but there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when her anger softened. When she spoke to him like a person, not a ghost from a life she wanted to forget. But the past still lingered between them. And Mark knew that before anything could truly heal, the hardest conversations still had to happen. One night, as he was about to leave, he stopped in the doorway and turned to Lily. Do you ever think you'll forgive me? Lily hesitated. Then, without looking up, she whispered, I don't know. Mark nodded, accepting the answer. Because for the first time, she didn't say no. Mark had spent months trying to fix what he broke. He had done everything he could, supporting Emma and Lily, proving he wasn't the same selfish man who had walked out on them. But no matter how much effort he put in, there was one thing he still didn't have. Their trust. And maybe he never would. One evening, Emma asked him to stay for dinner again. It had become almost a routine by now, him sitting at the small dining table while she cooked, Lily doing homework nearby. It wasn't normal, not like before, but it was something. Halfway through the meal, Emma suddenly set down her fork. Mark, we need to talk. Mark tensed. That sentence never led to anything good. Emma exhaled, looking at Lily before turning her gaze back to him. You've been showing up. Helping. Doing. Everything I never thought you would. Mark swallowed hard, bracing himself. But, Emma continued, her voice steady, what exactly do you want from us? Mark blinked. What? Emma leaned forward slightly. Are you trying to fix this so we can go back to being a family? Because if that's what you're thinking, I need you to be honest with yourself. And with us. Mark sat back, stunned. He had spent so much time proving he had changed, but he had never stopped to think about what came next. Did he want them back? Could they even go back? He glanced at Lily. She wasn't looking at him, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. I don't know, he admitted, his voice quiet. I just know I don't want to lose you both completely. Emma studied him. That's not an answer, Mark. Mark rubbed his face. I know. He exhaled sharply. I ruined everything. I don't deserve anything from you. I just want whatever you're willing to give. Lily finally looked up, her eyes unreadable. And what if we don't want to give you anything? The words hit like a punch to the gut, but Mark didn't flinch. Then I'll still be here. His voice was steady. Even if it's just outside your life instead of in it. For the first time since he had come back, Lily actually looked at him. Not past him. Not through him. At him. Emma sighed, her expression softening just slightly. This isn't something we can figure out overnight, Mark. I know. Emma hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. Lily didn't say a word. But she didn't leave the table either. And maybe that was enough. For now. Weeks passed, then months. Mark had no illusions about what he had done. No matter how much he tried to repair the damage, he knew there would always be cracks in the foundation. Some wounds don't heal completely. Some scars never fade. But something did change. Lily no longer treated him like a stranger. She still wasn't open with him, still guarded, but she acknowledged his presence. She answered when he spoke. She even laughed, once, at one of his awful dad jokes. It was barely anything. But to Mark, it was everything. Emma, on the other hand, remained a mystery. Some days she was distant, indifferent. Other days, she seemed almost comfortable around him. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, where the way she looked at him wasn't filled with hate. But it was never love. And Mark had accepted that it never would be. One evening, as he stood by the apartment door preparing to leave, Emma called out to him. Mark. He turned. Yeah. She hesitated, then crossed her arms. I've been thinking. Mark braced himself. That sentence always led to something heavy. Emma took a deep breath. You've proven that you've changed. And I respect that. Mark swallowed. But Emma's gaze was steady. But I don't love you anymore. It shouldn't have hurt. Not after everything he had done. Not after who he had been. But it did. Still, he nodded. I know. Emma exhaled, as if relieved that she didn't have to explain further. That doesn't mean you don't belong in Lily's life. You do. Mark's chest tightened. Does she think so? Emma hesitated, then called, Lily? Mark turned, startled. He hadn't realized Lily had been listening from the hallway. The 14-year-old stepped forward, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Emma nodded toward her. Tell him. Lily met his gaze. I don't know if I'll ever trust you, she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. Mark held his breath. But I want to try. His throat burned. He had promised himself he wouldn't cry, but damn it, this was everything. Mark nodded, his voice hoarse. That's all I could ever ask for. Lily gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into her room. Emma watched her go, then turned back to Mark. So, what are you going to do now? Mark let out a shaky breath. I don't know. Emma offered a small, almost kind smile. You'll figure it out. And for the first time in his life, Mark actually believed that he would. Months passed, and the pieces of their shattered lives slowly settled into something new. Not whole, not perfect, but something that could be rebuilt. Mark was still there. He had promised he wouldn't leave again, and this time he meant it. Lily didn't forgive him overnight. Some days she barely spoke to him. Other days she let him sit with her while she did her homework, answering his questions with more than just one-word replies. Once, she even let him drive her to school. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. Emma, on the other hand, had drawn a line that Mark knew he would never cross again. Their relationship would never go back to what it was before, and he had come to accept that. She had survived without him. She had fought through the darkest moments of her life alone. And now, she wasn't his Emma anymore. She was her own. One evening, as Mark was leaving the apartment, Emma stopped him at the door. "You don't have to come by every day," she said, crossing her arms. Mark studied her. "Do you want me to stop?" Emma sighed, rubbing her forehead. "No, but you need to start living your own life, Mark. You can't just orbit around us forever." Mark nodded slowly. "I know." She looked at him for a long time. "So what are you going to do?" Mark thought about it. For the first time in years, he had no one to blame but himself. No one to run to. No one to fall back on. It terrified him. But it also felt freeing. "I'm going to figure it out," he said honestly. Emma smirked. "For once, that actually sounds like a good plan." They stood in silence for a moment before she opened the door for him. "Good night, Mark." Mark stepped out into the cool night air, taking a deep breath. "Good night, Emma." And for the first time in his life, he wasn't looking back. He was looking forward. Mark didn't magically fix everything. He didn't suddenly become the perfect father, or the man Emma deserved from the start. But he tried. And over time, things changed. Lily let him be a part of her life, not as the dad who abandoned her, but as the man who was doing his best to make up for it. Emma moved on. She built a life for herself, one that didn't revolve around Mark's mistakes. And Mark, for the first time, he built something of his own. He found a job, a small apartment. He stopped drinking. He became someone his daughter could one day be proud of. Maybe Lily would never fully forgive him. Maybe Emma would never forget what he had done. But they had all learned something from the pain. That redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about proving every single day that you are no longer the person who caused it. And Mark, he was ready to prove it.